Hey Millennials, what's going on? I hope you guys are good. Welcome back to my channel. My name is Najwa. If you're new here, I'm so happy you're here. I really would love to have you stay for a while. Please hit the like and subscribe button. Please hit the bell. Subscribe to my channel. I'm building a little growing community here. Like-minded individuals. We talk about everything. We talk about pop culture. We talk about politics. We talk about motivation. We talk about what it's like to grow up in this crazy world as Gen Z, Millennials. Go ahead, click the subscribe button. Come on, I'd love to have you. So, I feel like, and this is not me trying to be like on a high horse or anything like that, but I feel like we need to revisit the three branches of government and talk about why it's so important for us to vote. Not necessarily just primary elections like for the president, but for all legislators, okay? So, I'm really not trying to demean anyone here. I'm not trying to belittle anybody because I don't know everything. I really do not know everything. You might even hear me talk throughout this video and question myself from time to time. Like, I seriously don't know everything. I don't know anything. I don't know everything. I'm just a normal everyday person. My expertise is in marketing and advertising, okay? So, and even in that, you know, there are still things that I'm learning. Even though I've been working for a decade and studying for close to a decade, it's like, dude, everybody, like, you're always going to be learning. But I do think that the powers that be, especially extreme far right and far left dissenting voices, have basically treated millennials and Gen Z kind of like kids, kind of like annoying little brats that they didn't really want to give all the information to because they were too busy having fun holding all the power. It's why you don't see very many millennials or Gen Z people in seats of power in government or management. You're seeing them little by little. You see some young 40-year-old CEOs, you know, in the big tech companies and in the startup world, but not necessarily 20s and 30s, and not necessarily that you should. I mean, we haven't gone to school long enough or been working long enough so that in large numbers we really should be having, you know, those positions at a large rate. Of course, there are going to be exceptions, but we should be voting, you know, legislators into office. We should be voting people into the House of Representatives. We should be voting people into the Senate. We should be voting for the president. We should be making sure that people running for things like mayor or governor or sheriff, that they're not crazy fascists who are going to turn America into a circus the way that it is right now. Ideally, there would have been people who would have been telling us how to do this stuff. But it's like baby boomers and even maybe the silent generation to a certain extent, we're too busy just fighting and mindlessly scrolling through social media to remember us. So, you know, of course, I don't want to blanket that. I don't want to sound like a douche. Like, my parents' generation is baby boomer. Thankfully, my parents are pretty proactive when it comes to this stuff. But I see a lot of people like, I'm sorry, like older individuals, people in their 60s and 70s who are too concerned about power grabbing and who are addicted to social media. People think that young people are addicted to social media, but it's actually older people. Anyway, let me not go off on a tangent. Long story short, millennials, less Gen Z, but millennials, y'all, when we were in elementary school, we had to learn about the three branches of government. We had to learn about how a bill becomes law. Hey, my name is Bill. You guys remember that cartoon, you know? Gen Z, I feel like, gets it less. I feel really bad for Gen Z because they just are basically growing up in a super polarized world that just exists on culture wars. That's all that they see. Anyway, the ball has fallen off because a lot of strong dissenting voices on the far right and the far left basically don't want young people voting. They don't want young people voting. They don't really want young people even knowing how the system works, how bill becomes law, how the Senate works, how the House of Representatives works, how the Supreme Court works, how even, the president's cabinet works. They don't want people knowing that, because that means the more that people know, the less easy it's going to be for billionaires and weird lobbyists with weird ulterior motives, that they don't just get by on the basis of people's ignorance. But young people, by and large, at least millennials and Gen Z, to my experience, we want diversity, we want multiculturalism, we want fairness, we want equity among minorities. We don't want LGBTQ people to be silenced or, how do I want to say, disenfranchised. You don't have to agree with it, but we don't want our LGBTQ friends to be being treated like it was medieval Europe. We want climate change to be taken very seriously. We want to work in a job environment that caters to our needs, our unique needs, not in a way that is spoiled or self-centered, but just, the world that we live in today is different from the world of 1923 or even 1963 or even 1983. It's like just the unique financial, family, policy needs that we have today. We want to be able to purchase a house. Like me, myself, I'm 32 years old. I'm getting older, like things like starting a family, having childcare, purchasing a house, being able to purchase a house. I look at my parents and my grandparents, they were able to purchase way earlier, than our generation is. We want those things, but we're not getting those things because we're having mental health crises, because we're having stupid culture wars. So, again, not talking down to you. A lot of this is like I kind of had to figure it out through research. Some of it, I've actually learned about from people who were able to share this knowledge with me, actual lawyers, actual policymakers and advocates. Some of it is from my parents. Some of it is just from reading. Something that I found really interesting is that I did think about a lot of the stuff that I learned in elementary school that I hadn't thought about in years and decades, because I just became really disinterested in politics. Like many of you in 2016, I just was so over it, and that there was a reason for that. Like, there was a reason for that, because the farthest right of the spectrum basically just said, oh, we can get a lot of people to just like not even think that they should worry about politics. We can get what we want. We can push these agendas of these terrible billionaires who are pumping their gunk into the world, and we can stay rich. So, but as time has gone on, I started thinking more about it. Okay, there are 3 branches of government: judicial, legislative, executive. Okay, cool. Okay, I'm thinking about it again. Well, who's our senators? Who is our governors? Who is our... Okay, so let's talk about it, because it's really, really important to know. And it is okay to not know everything. What you're going to find right now is a lot of people, if you speak out about politics, if you speak out about things that are happening on the news and things like that, there are going to be some people who are going to try to make it seem like you are unintelligent, uninformed, whatever it is. And it's okay sometimes to not know everything, as long as you admit it and you keep doing your research and doing research from reputable sources. Reputable sources oftentimes are going to be governmental sources. That's been part of one of the largest parts of the far right extremist playbook right now, is to diminish the federal government, to diminish all of the structures that we've worked in place. Like, it's absolutely bizarre, But those are going to be the ones that you want to look towards, not far right news media, not fake news on social media. Just go right to the camel's mouth. Um, Go and look at the government's website. Go and look at the White House's website. If you want to know about, federal defense or the Federal Defense Fund, go and look at their website. Don't go and look at, some offshoot of that. Type into Google real quick. If you have a question and you're like, what's the difference between a senator and a representative? Literally, just type it into Google. So, the first thing, let's revisit the difference between a legislator, a congressperson, a senator, and a representative. Okay, for many of you, you guys might already be there, but I'm going to dial it down just in case you don't know it, okay? And my ultimate goal in all of this is to get you to vote, not just for primaries or the president, but for all of the stops in between. For the local council men and women, for mayors, for governors, for U.S. Senate, on the federal level, and your state Senate, for your state House of Representatives, and for federal House of Representatives. You need to be voting for all of those people, and voting for people who are going to advocate for the things I mentioned before, for multiculturalism, to make sure that we can buy houses, for good policy and protection of our military, for a devotion to education and making sure that people still can be educated and that there's not these draconian laws placed on education. For climate change, making sure that people take climate change seriously. The reason why we're not getting that right now is because we didn't vote and we didn't put the right people into place on the county, city, state, federal level. So that's why we're dealing with this. And it's okay to have questions. It's okay to not know who all the candidates are. It's okay to not know when an election is. Just Google it. And I'm going to give you some resources that's going to make it easier. So back to the question at hand. What's the difference between a legislator, a congressperson, a senator, and a representative? So, first of all, legislator, OR, and congressperson, congressman, congresswoman, however you want to say it, can be swapped out interchangeably, okay? Just remember you have three branches of the U.S. government. You have legislative as in anything that has to do with law making, people who make laws, okay? And then you have the president, you have the executive branch, which is presidential. So that is the president and the vice president, okay? And all of the people who work for the president's administration. And then you have judicial, which is the Supreme Court, which is all the people who work in terms of supporting the courts, the federal judges, the state judges, all of those, okay? Legislator and congressperson or congressman, congresswoman are basically the senators, the people who are in the state Senate, the federal Senate, and the federal House of Representatives and each state's representatives. So I think in total in the federal House, there's 400 and something, right? And they have less power than the senators, but in some ways they have more flexibility over policies in the United States of America. The senators in the federal government have more flexibility over foreign policy, right? And they have 6-year terms, the federal senators, whereas the House of Representatives, the federal House of Representatives, only has 2 terms. And I believe the state level House of Representatives also only have 2 terms. So in general, on a state level and a federal level, senators have more power than the representatives. But the representatives, in a way, do just that. They represent the common people a lot more, okay? They have much more representative of the common people. So on the state and federal level, if you really, really want to see things being done about roads and infrastructure, about healthcare, and about tax reform, about inflation, about buying a house, about getting student loans or going to get an education, hopefully not having to get student loans, um, about your insurance, um, things like that. Your representatives are really, really important. Okay? So the branches basically need to work together. The legislative, again, legislative as in law, needs to work with the president. The president also needs to work with the Supreme Court. They kind of all work in not always exact cohesion. They each kind of exist like their own little organism, but together they all produce results. It's like the reason we see so much chaos right now in the US is because the people who are in place, many of them, look at, I don't want to name names, but look at some of the far right voices right now who are in the Senate. Look at some of them who are controlling Congress, and look at their extreme demands, like demands that just don't even make sense. And look at a lot of their backgrounds. Many of them never holding office before they actually took U.S. office, never having any knowledge of policy or foreign policy before they took office. Some of them not even knowing the three branches of government. Some of them are representing districts that they don't live in. Like, basically, we got there because we haven't been proactive enough to know, like, what's going on and how we can be change agents to, like, forge better change, be more progressive. The way that millennials and Gen Z are going to get stuff on the table where, we get the representation we want, we get the jobs we want, we get the health care we want, we get the houses we want, we get the education we want, we get the pay we want, we get to live in safe cities, is by electing the right legislators, okay? So if you're kind of confused about candidates, now, like we said, the House of Representatives, those elections roll around every 2 years, and the Senate rolls around every 6 years. You can pretty much bank that, a lot of those roles that you want to elect for mayors and governors, senators, representatives is going to come when you elect the president. Don't hold my word for that with certainty, because I think it varies on a state basis, but we're going to talk about that too. But for the most part, if you do keep an eye on when the next presidential election is going to come, when the presidential election comes, you can also vote for all of these other roles, okay? You can vote for governors, you can vote for senators, you can vote for representatives and stuff. There's a website called Ballotpedia. On Ballotpedia, you can go on there and you can actually look up what the structure of the House of Representatives, what the Senate looks like, okay? When you hear people saying, oh, the GOP controls Congress, et cetera, things like that, it's because, there is a select number of seats in the House of Representatives and a select number of seats in the Senate that come around each election cycle. And if the majority of those are taken up by Democrats, Congress is going to be ran by the Democrats. If the majority of those seats are taken by Republicans, then the Congress is going to be ran by Congress. One of the reasons right now we have such a lack of harmony is because a lot of people really do only vote for the president. And so where we are right now as a nation is fairly democratic. The nation put a Democratic president in the office, despite stupid fake electors, so the election was stolen, it's bull crap, whatever. America elected a Democratic president. So we got a Democratic head of state, but we've got, and the Supreme Court is also majority-led Republican. But that doesn't reflect the majority of the country. Again, the reason being because when we voted for Supreme Court justices, when we voted for Senate, when we voted for representatives, like, we didn't vote. We just didn't. We didn't. We only voted for the president, and it's why we have the problems that we have right now. So the way that this works, like, look to your state first. Like, we already know most people are going to go, if they do vote, they're going to go and vote for the president, okay? But the way that the United States Constitution works is it really revolves a lot around the states. There's the federal government, yes, okay? That's like this overarching level. But unlike European Union countries, you know, for instance, like I live in France, even though I'm American, but the federal government in France basically is the singular source I go to for all of my stuff. You know, if we are looking at our insurance or cars or whatever, that it's going to be through the federal government. It's not going to be through like the department that we live in. Like there's going to be some stuff through the department, but overarching for the major stuff, education, defense, security, national security, healthcare, it's all through the federal government. But in the US, it's not that way, okay? There's a lot of stuff through the state. So you basically really need to know about like what your district is. You need to know what your district is, because for your representative who's going to be in the state House of Representatives, not the federal one, but the state one, you need to know your district. For your state senate, same thing. You're going to need to know your district to know who that person in seat is. You also need to know that representatives don't really speak on the floor. Like, not really. It's really the Senate that does. So the senators are really important, in other words. And they're there longer. You know, like, it's like if they're tyrannical, you got 6 years of that tyranny, unless they're going to be impeached. So one of the best ways to know who's in your district is to go to, it used to be called openstates.org, but I think they changed it to, I think if you go to openstates.org, it'll still go there. openstates.org. It'll still go there. But now it's called pluralpolicy.com. So you just go to pluralpolicy.com, or you go to openstates.org, pluralpolicy.com, or open states, plural states, open states, states.org, O-R-G. And you can find your legislators there by entering in your address. So you just enter in your address and it'll tell you everything. It'll tell you from federal up to state. Okay? It'll tell you who your senators are. It'll tell you who your representatives are. The sheriffs, things like that, sheriffs, mayors, and stuff, you can also find that through Plural Policy or Open States, however you want to call it. You can find that through Ballotpedia as well. And when I say ballot, it is BALLOTPEDIA.com. Again, I'm just double checking so I know I'm telling you the right thing. Ballotpedia.org. Sorry. Ballotpedia.org. Also gives you the 2024 elections, and it tells you the presidential election, tells you about the presidential candidates, tells you the congressional elections, the state executive elections, state legislative elections, state judge elections, local elections, everything. It tells you everything. You don't have to know all of this stuff at once, you know, just every time you kind of think about it, every time you look at the news and you see something, you say, hey, that really sucks, and I want to see that improve. Go to Ballotpedia. Just every time you see something, you say, that sucks, I want to change it. Go to Ballotpedia, or go to Public Policy or openstates.org. It's just easier for me to remember the old name. If you want to be like me, Plural Policy. It's easier for me to remember the old name. Go to Plural Policy or go to Ballotpedia. Plural Policy, openstates.org, Ballotpedia, okay? And if you are just feeling like way super lazy, you can also go and go on Google and just type in 2024 elections, or whatever the election cycle is, 2026 elections, 2030 elections, whatever it is, okay? Just go and type in, whatever the year is in elections, Wikipedia, okay? And you'll actually land on Wikipedia, and it'll tell you all of the candidates that it knows of so far, okay? Of course, Wikipedia is being constantly updated by just like everyday average people. So, like, everybody who's running might not be in there yet. But it's also it's so important for you to understand what's going on in your state. If you hear about a town hall in your district, in your state going on, check it out. Look at the local news in your state and really be on top of who's running for elected official across all things, across the court, across law enforcement, across Supreme Court, across legislature, across the Senate, across the House of Representatives. If you see signs, on the interstate, if you see signs around town hung up, blah, blah, blah for Senate, blah, blah, blah for governor, keep an eye out for it. Take a little note in your phone, write it down, go on Google, look at those people later. If you see that those people are friggin' bonkers, talking about authoritarianism, fascist type stuff, then okay, that's problematic. Take a note of the good people. Take a note of the people who are like, dang, I like what they're talking about. Okay? Take a note of it mentally, but also write it down. Write it down in a note in your phone or write it manually. And follow those resources online that I told you about, Plural Policy, Ballotpedia, and vote. Vote. If you got a little bit of extra momentum, you can take it all the way, baby. You can be writing letters to your legislator. You can email them. You can be going to town halls. You can be, forming little tea parties in your neighborhood with your friends, talking about, elections. You can take it all the way. You can even run for a local or federal office yourself if you want to. If you've got that momentum, if you got the time, if you got the education, whatever it might be, do it, because we need more sane people, center left, to push the Democratic Party forward. If you don't have that time and you don't have that momentum, just start with voting. Just start with voting the representatives, the senators, the law enforcement, the judges. Get the right people in place. Get the right people who, when you hear them speak, when you see them on local news, when you see them on YouTube, wherever it is that they're giving their campaign talking points, and if they're not speaking, be skeptical. Go and look them up yourself. Read articles and see what they're talking about. If they talk about crazy authoritarian crap, conspiracy theories, make sure that you don't vote for them, and make sure that you spread education about the person who's not doing that. And when you see that person who is talking about, let's get us more jobs, let's embrace multiculturalism, let's embrace tolerance and not have our LGBTQ people being slaughtered out in the middle of the street, let's embrace, education and education reform, let's embrace African American history and history of indigenous people. Let's embrace our minority sisters and brothers. Let's bring America together of all races, all socioeconomic backgrounds. Let us bring more of our jobs home. Let's have the labor force be more robust. Let's reform immigration policy, gun policy. Let's have gun policy be safe. Those things that millennials and Gen Z, if you're like me, you're probably center left, but millennial and Gen Z Democrats, what we care about. And even if you're a Republican watching this and you're a sane a sane Republican, they do exist. I know that you guys exist too. You guys can take this information as well. For the people, the representatives, the legislators, the senators, the judges, the law enforcement, the ones who represent your ideals and the ideals that are best for America in your eyes, as long as they like are not like fascist and extreme and violent and disenfranchising, yeah, you can use the same stuff. It doesn't matter what side of the gate you're on. It doesn't matter if you're Democratic or Republican or whatever. Like, you use the same processes to get the right people, or who you believe are the right people in office. So I hope that this is helpful. We'll come back and talk about this a lot more. I feel like it just need to be said. I don't know if you guys know it. I don't know. If you do, great. You can just skip this video. But if you don't, I'm here with you. And we can figure it out together. Okay, let me know what you guys think. Sending you my love. Bye. Make sure you hit the subscribe button. Talk to you next time.